Hello, can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, yeah.
all right, I see thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you. Well, Eric there and friend, you guys have a sweet setup. Looks like I'm on a big screen TV or something. That's how it's done. Cheers. All right, welcome everyone. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to come on, and we'll get it started, okay?
Hello, hello. Am I on mute? No.
No,
No.
definitely not.
No, I'm not. Okay. I think
Are we good?
so.
All right, let's kick it off. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And my name is Martin Azambuya. I'm one of the instructors here at Mosaic. I'm also one of the editors and proofreaders and revisionists of Lewis's book, Demystifying the Out-of-Body Experience. I'll be leading or guiding this discussion today, and I'll be chiming in if I'm allowed. Lewis, yes?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Okay, cool. Lewis and I have known each other for almost 20 years now. To give you a little bit of context, 19 of those years have been as colleagues teaching about these subjects in terms of under the umbrella of spiritual development, right? OBE, subtle energies, etc. So we've taught all over Mexico, US, Europe, South America. We've been teams participating and being part of teams in teaching classes together as well. So Very happy to be here, to help moderate this discussion. And so, as you know, Lewis is the author of Demystifying the Out-of-Body Experience book. He's an international lecturer as well. He's been studying and developing his abilities with non-physical phenomena since he was a teen, when he began having spontaneous experiences with it. He's been teaching for the last 25 years these subjects related in all the places that I already mentioned. So, Lewis, welcome. Great to have you. Oh, now you're on mute, Lewis. Definitely now you're on mute. Oh, yes.
This happens all the time.
There we go.
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. I think that they were telling me about the names and the different people that were going to join today. I was able to recognize some old friends, and we are glad to welcome some new friends. So yep. Thank you.
Very well. Before we kick it off, I just want to send a shout out to Jordan Bryant. Good to have you here with us. For us to know. There he is. All right. There we are. You had the great setup, Jordan, of course. Well done. So Jordan has a YouTube channel called The Jordan Bryant Show. We encourage you guys to check it out. He does podcasts on astral projection, biohacking to improve health, even UFOs. So sounds very interesting. It is. He also has a podcast on this book, in fact. And if you're interested, go ahead and check it out on YouTube. So, guys, without further ado, we'll jump right in. We've received quite a few questions, and thank you for all of you that have sent them. To be fair, we're going to cover them in the order that they were received. So if we have time, it would be great. We'll get through all of them, but I apologize in advance if we're not able to have time to get through them all in this session, okay? So the first one that we received is on OBE prep, Lewis. And this participant says, after relaxing and no longer being able to feel my body, I begin to attempt velo and get extremely hot, which stops the entire process. Do you have any suggestions on how I can overcome this?
On attempting to have an out-of-body experience, yes.
Yes.
And I think that what he or she is saying is that the heat is stopping her from continuing to practice, right?
Correct. Yes. She or he gets extremely hot, which stops the entire process. So they stop actually being able to continue the velo.
Okay. Yeah. That it's not the most common type of sensation, but sometimes it can occur. That when we are developing our energy work and we are working with a velo, or sometimes also called of the vertical flow, sometimes as we are going through some specific areas or blockages or through certain phases in our energetic body, sometimes we get some of these different symptoms. Some of them can be increased heat, and it can be uncomfortable for a little bit. Normally, it's a phase that we go through, and after we're able to clear that area of energies, then that becomes much milder, and then we're able to continue doing our practice. It's almost like a little barrier that we have to break through to a certain extent. I have, just as a reference, I have seen how other people, sometimes they say that they are doing, the vertical flow or the velo, and sometimes for a couple of weeks, for example, they start sleeping a lot more, or sometimes they sleep a lot less, or sometimes they gain a little bit of weight. By the way, I don't want to scare anybody here, but sometimes I've seen cases, obviously it depends on the particularity of the person, but I've seen people that they were, for example, very thin, and they start to do the velo, they hit this barrier, and then it seems that they gain a little bit of weight for a week or two, and then once that tends to go towards the healthy condition of the individual, after that, the weight gain stops, and then the progress continues. And by the way, just to give the opposite side of the coin, I have also seen people who sometimes for a couple of weeks after doing this, they lose some weight because they just simply had a little bit of excess, and the work with energy sort of like helps to regulate a little bit their system and brings their weight a little bit down. So this intense heat, many times this is what it happens to be a phase like a barrier that needs to be, overcome to a certain extent.
Very good. Thank you. You know, just uh, to
Yeah.
dovetail on that, this actually, 20 years ago, this was actually an issue that I personally had as well. At the beginning of starting to do the velo and exploring energies, I would also get these heat waves that would start in my face, and I'd start to have the sensation of of sweating, and it would be extremely uncomfortable. And over the first several months, as I would chalk it off in my case to imbalance at the time. Maybe my energies were a little bit more viscose rather than free flowing, rather than water. And as I started to unblock a little bit more, that subsided for good. So interesting. This person seems to be having a similar experience.
Yeah, and let me say, as the energies become more flexible, a lot of these sometimes like little rough episodes or a little bit of rougher symptoms, they become more subdued and they become more milder, and then it's just a little bit easier. Sometimes I compare it a little bit to when we start to do yoga. And if we have never done it, the first few times that we are stretching in certain positions, it's not the easiest, especially if we don't have that practice. But after a while, after a few sessions, or sometimes a few more sessions for some of us that are not that flexible, we get used to it, and then it becomes much easier, and our flexibility has improved, and our performance also becomes better. Yeah. Martin, did you freeze? I think oh.
Have any specific suggestions now?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry about that. Do you have any specific suggestions or instructions on how to manifest my evolutionary partner?
How to manifest your evolutionary partner. All right. So now
Yes,
we are now we are getting into the good stuff.
into it.
Can I joke and say speed dating? uh, you know, the evolutionary partner, for sure, that usually what we have seen, what I have even seen, is that there are a few number of people. I don't want to say several, but um, some individuals with whom, if we are in the process of performing our life task and going along with our evolution, it would be ideal, or we plan it for us to encounter at some moment during our life, and for us to be like partners in crime in an evolutionary sense, for us to be able to advance, in a very positive and, evolutionary fashion, one helping the other, and sort of like trying to create a synergy between the two, not just along the lines of, the physical benefits that we all know that can come from a healthy relationship, like, shared affection and finances. I joke with this, but I know sometimes certain people that, they want to find somebody else just so that they can share the rent with, and and not that that's necessarily a bad, a bad deal, but
Tragedy.
obviously, yes. But obviously, in the case of an evolutionary partner, what we want is to be able to share all of these elements that I am, the physical elements that we already know about, but also we want to be able to share evolution with the other person. So, for example, try to have out-of-body experiences in common, try to work with energies one with the other, etc., etc. So it's a very ideal condition. Now, how to manifest it? First of all, we normally this individual, or whether he or she, or it, or all of the pronouns that we have now, whether that we're going to find that person, or better yet, that person usually is within our track of evolution. So one of the first things is we have to be actively involved in our process of development and evolving related to our life task. And so what this means is, obviously, most people, I would say almost everybody, we are good people. We try to do our best, and this is okay. This is good. No, nothing, this is certainly very okay. But besides just being a good person, we usually evolution implies us actively trying to go and trying to develop ourselves. And sometimes in these activities of trying to develop ourselves or to trying to contribute, with our evolution and the evolution of others, is where this other person, probably is where we're going to find this other person. So normally it's a very active endeavor. So for example, we realize that part of our life task, and again, this varies from person to person. So this is just one example. Please don't assume that I'm saying everybody has to go this route. But let's say that in our specific case, we realize that one of our main tasks is to try to concern ourselves with the problems of others, assistance, help. So then if that happens to be the case, sometimes we join a specific NGO or a volunteering group or something where we are actively, contributing towards our evolution and the evolution of others. And that's a place where, this person might be. So it has to be, in order for it to be an evolutionary tool, it has to be obviously, or an evolutionary partner, it has to be obviously in a revolutionary track. So more than likely it won't be, at the bar in the corner where sometimes we go. So it's more related to evolution, right? But let me also say, this is a huge topic. Just with this question, by the way, we could be here 2-3 hours. But just to give you another idea here for other people to consider it. Sometimes we are already in a relationship that is good, a good relationship that fits a lot of the physical elements and has a lot of stability, etc. Sometimes what might make it an evolutionary relationship and an evolutionary partner is to try now to add the element of growing and developing spiritually together. So for example, a question that many times just simply needs to be asked, and communication is a big part here, is just to ask the other person and at the same time share with the other person. But first of all, to ask, how can I help you with your evolution? I want to be able to help you with your evolution. And by the way, for me, what I would like, if you can, for you to help me is A, B, C, D, so that the current relationship that you already have goes up to another level. And then you are now both also investing in your own personal development, whether it's paranormal phenomena, whether it's out-of-body experiences, whether it's assistance to others, etc. So I'm just mentioning that just for us not to think that the evolutionary partner is somebody out there, outside maybe of the current relationship that we have right now. Sometimes it isn't. And the other thing also is that several of you probably have much more life experience in this life than me. You know how life changes tremendously. So sometimes, well, this year is proof of that, but beyond that, us, sometimes from 5 years to the next 5 years, it almost seems that we are a new person. And I say that because sometimes there might be some individuals around us that at this moment, they might not, we might not be able to see them as an evolutionary partner, but it's also good to try to analyze their potential to become evolutionary partners in 3, 4, 5 years. So that is also something to keep in mind, because sometimes the person at that moment might not be the one already, but they will be the one in 3, 5 years. And by the way, that also might apply to us. We at this moment might not be the one for that person, but we might become the one for that person in 3, 5 years. And then we're going to have 50 years of being a partner in crime. So it's also good to understand those factors. Notice that, it's hopefully it's a life of 80, 90 years, and there are, many years ahead to try to produce, and contribute with many aspects. Yeah. So I think that, I would summarize it like that. This is certainly a topic, that we could expand quite a bit. And I think that on the book, I only had room to talk about it, for a couple of pages or so, which, is one of these topics that are extremely interesting, and they touch on so many other factors. So thank you for that question, by the way.
Yes. You know, one thing I would add there in terms of just from a internal personal
Yeah,
approach, the interesting part when we think about, you know, having to find someone or coming from a place of lack, let's put it that way, it could maybe make it more difficult actually to connect on you know, let's call it higher elements of ourself and the other person in terms of what the potential would be or what it can be and our growth. And instead of, you know, so not coming from that place of like, oh, I need to find someone, otherwise my life is not going to be sufficient, right? So that's an
yeah,
interesting kind of thing to keep in mind in this kind of process,
yeah.
coming from a single guy, right?
Yes.
So
No, no, absolutely. What you're saying is right. Try to also to, obviously try to maintain your ideals, your evolutionary criteria, and
yes,
try to be very honest with
priorities.
yourself. I think obviously I haven't seen the cameras of everybody. We're all adults here. Et cetera, et cetera. So understand that at some moments we are in a moment of lack, in a moment of neediness, and sometimes we have to find an avenue, to solve that. But make sure that that is not the thing that is driving, or the main factor that is driving, or that is driving your decision of who is an evolutionary partner or not. The evolutionary partner is something a little bit more uh, based on principles that are a little bit more long lasting, even agreements sometimes that we did even before we were born and before we had the physical need, or some physical needs that at this moment we have. Yeah, so good to keep that as well in mind. And as adults, we can organize ourselves. Let's try to maybe maybe the moment is not now for the evolutionary partner. Maybe it'll be, in 6 months, but the need cannot wait 6 months. So as an adult, let's organize ourselves to try to fulfill that need in the healthiest fashion possible. And let's work on ourselves to be on the evolutionary track so that we leave the door open so that in 6 months we can get to that point. Yeah. For example, obviously, in here there
Mhm.
can be so many trajectories. The lives of people, of all of us, are so complex and so rich, so interesting, I would say.
All right, very good. Third one, do you have any specific suggestions or instructions on how to request and clearly receive guidance in life from my spirit guides?
To clearly request and clearly receive. Uh,
Yes, in
yes,
life. So in physical life from spirit guides.
yeah. Let me say that hopefully this also doesn't. Well, in life, I'm gonna take it as well. We are alive here, which
Yeah.
obviously can also include in and out of body experience, which of course is a lot of the aspects of the book go into that. But I guess that the first thing that it's good for us to consider is that our spirit guide naturally doesn't have a physical body, but it's a non-physical entity, a non-physical being. So the communication has to be energetical, or in an out-of-body experience. So one of the things that we can try to do to try to improve that communication, to bridge, to close the gap, so to speak, is obviously to work on our own, paranormal abilities, our own energetic development, our own intuition, of course, so as to be able to hear them a little bit clearly, or understand them a little bit clearer. Um, they are, generally speaking, usually already trying to suggest things to us, to recommend things to us. And one of the things that we can also do is try to have moments of almost like listening sessions or listening moments. So I know some people sometimes, for example, they meditate. Naturally, it's a little bit, so we could meditate with the focus of trying to hear them out a little bit more. Many people
Receive.
sometimes, they are able also to receive a little bit more guidance while they're trying to have out of body experiences or working with energies, simply because they are a little bit more open at that moment. They are trying to pay attention on themselves, on their body, on their sensations. And then, in essence, the door is a little bit more open, and some of those, intuitions and ideas can come through. So certainly the works with energy that are described in the book, help tremendously. And let me say, sometimes for many of these things, really there isn't like, how could I say, like a
Recipe.
miracle, yeah, like a recipe or like a miracle cure, like some bit of information that we're missing so that then we can reach our goal. But sometimes the information, to a certain extent, we have it, and many of these things are more about, developing a certain skill with the information that we already have. So, and sometimes this might take a little bit of time, of course. So, I wish, I would be of the opinion of most of you, I wish I could just simply push a button, or hear something and just do it, and then I would get the info. But normally it's a matter of us developing and improving. And what I can tell you that I have seen to try to, evidence this that I'm mentioning is that sometimes I would see students, for example, in the first time that they're trying to work with energies, and upon describing, the exercises of working with energies, for them, it seems abstract. It seems strange. I am going to move what? And then after the first exercise, they basically, their default answer sometimes would be, I didn't feel anything, nothing. And that same person, sometimes 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later in another class, they would already recognize so many of their sensations and so many of their perceptions, simply because they had matured that ability, they had developed it further. So, and the improvement continues like that, similar, for example, to going to the gym. So there arrives a moment in which we are able to have intuitions that are more clear, coming from them, and we're also able to recognize a little bit better that they are coming from them, if you understand what I mean, and not necessarily coming from a very good friend that, once has our best intention, but it's not necessarily the level of our spirit guide, if you understand what I mean. So in the energies, in the intuition, we are able to recognize the personality of the person who is sending that intuition to us. Sometimes for some of you, for some of us, we might recognize it, for example, sort of like in the tone of voice that forms inside of us the moment that we're hearing a recommendation. For others of us, it might be in the specific sensation that comes in. So we're able, for example, to recognize, and this also we develop it with a certain experience and time. And we realize my spirit guide normally, when they are close or when they are trying to give me an intuition, for me, for example, I usually feel it as, a sensation in the back of my neck, in the chakra that we have here on the back of my neck. So I might feel several other sensations of energy from several other entities, no problem with that. But I am able to recognize the individuality with which my spirit guide communicates with me. And, and also a lot of that experience sometimes can come from an out-of-body experience, because sometimes in an out-of-body experience, as we interact with them, maybe in a more clear fashion, generally speaking, and on average it's more clear, as we are interacting with them, we're able to recognize these individual aspects of them that when we feel them in the physical reality, we recognize it is them. Yeah. So imagine that none of us have had cameras here, and each one of us were going to introduce ourselves, and the only thing that we had to go by from each one of us was our tone of voice. If afterwards, if somebody, after everybody introduced themselves, if somebody else is saying something or repeating something, we are probably going to start to connect. Wasn't this the person who said that they are at this moment in Miami? I think this was the person. That's probably why they're asking this. So you start, because you already had a certain experience with that person, you start to connect the dots, and you start to realize this is this person who is talking. So you're able to recognize the individual patterns of that non-physical entity. So it's how could I say, a development process, certainly on our own. What I can maybe add and tell you is that generally speaking, they are already trying to connect to us. they are already trying to recommend things and to guide us. And if you have had past experiences with them, try to, because of all of this that I am mentioning, and probably even other things that you might have read, try at this moment to think about that moment and try to think about how that interaction made you feel. For example, was there a specific energetic sensation in some part of your body? I know we probably paid attention to the message, to the content, but also pay attention to how the content came wrapped up and how you received it, because that probably already tells you part of the individual way in which you communicate with that non-physical entity, and you can develop that. Yeah. The more, let me say this, the more you recognize and you're able to recognize how they communicate, they know this, and the more they rely on this. Does that make sense? They already know whether you're able to identify them very clearly or not yet, or not as clearly yet. So if you are able to develop the process of identifying them very clearly, they are going to rely on that, because they know I can give them a specific guidance, suggestion, etc. And they already know that you're going to understand it, classify it in the proper fashion. Yeah. So, yeah.
Louis,
It,
would you say that what could help the process as well is for a person to understand their own patterns also? So the more we understand our own processes within ourselves, the easier it is to be able to identify when a thought is not ours, whether it be a positive or negative or whatever thought, right? So that having our own base understanding in terms of what our own, kind of status quo is when it comes to our own thoughts, our own sentiments, and that sort of thing. So to be able to,
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a very good point, Martin. Yeah, absolutely. Not our thoughts for sure, and also our own energies. So as you develop your energetic capacity, and that's why it's good even to experience this, and to repeat this. You also are going to recognize what are your baseline of sensations, your baseline of experiences, so that obviously this coming from an external non-physical entity is going to be slightly different to your baseline, so that you also don't get confused with your baseline.
Okay? Yeah. What I find sometimes also in the process, a lot of people sometimes might tend to do is expect that it's a certain sensation outside, right? And there could be some, of course, a sensation here on your skin, what have you, energetic signals. But also many times it could be something within, so that one feels a certain way, whether including whether it be sentiments, but are also our thoughts, and that one can go, wait a second, I'm actually at a higher level of clarity, of peace, of expansiveness, of interconnectedness, of affection, with others in a general way. And sometimes that, I think, could be an interesting way to think about what spirit guide, perhaps a little more higher level, if you want to call it that, could be around or closer to us, perhaps.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, several of the things obviously that are already described in the book. Spirit guides are normally making suggestions, recommendations, and related also to in general to spiritual things, to evolutionary things. So they normally are not going to tell you in an absolute fashion, don't do that. Sort of like limiting a little bit your free will. They are normally trying to, help you to expand the free will, or to respect at the same time, not just your free will, but also the free will of everybody else. So keep also, obviously, those criteria in mind, because sometimes, and I mentioned this in the book, the chapter of relationships with other individuals is also extremely complex. It's already complex here in the physical reality, right? Already, we could make an entire science just of the way in which families relate to each other during Thanksgiving. And, this is a physical aspect. This is a physical thing, but, the amount of interests that go back and forth there. So when we add the non-physical reality, this gets multiplied there. So the relationships with other entities is extremely complex. So notice how we have certain individuals around us that are good friends, that we like them and they like us, and they certainly want something that is good for us. However, they at this moment might be not in the physical reality, but they might be in the non-physical reality. But even then, they are not necessarily at the level of the spirit guide. So sometimes that also is important to keep in mind, to be able to differentiate, between a more spiritual, evolutionary, recommendation, and a recommendation that maybe is more, how could I say, more for the immediate time, and not necessarily a bad one, but not necessarily coming from the spirit guide. And just one more thing to add, in this process of self-analysis, and part of what I think, Martin, you were alluding to, in this process of trying to understand ourselves, also try to see if you have a specific expectation of what is it that your spirit guide should tell you. This is very important, because sometimes we want to do something, and that might be the right thing, but sometimes it might not be the most evolutionary thing, or might actually not even be evolutionary or spiritual, but we really like it. And if we have the expectation that the person should tell us, do it, even if we're getting other messages, sometimes we might be eliminating them or blocking them, because I want for them to tell me that this is it. Yeah, so just be aware of your expectations so that you don't limit any other messages. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so we could even link this one with the prior one of the evolutionary partner. Sometimes we have somebody next to us that is, we get very well along, but and nothing wrong with that person. It's just that it might not be an evolutionary partner, but we really like her or him. So if they might be suggesting somebody else, outside of this, but we might, because of our expectations, sometimes it might be a little bit harder for us to take that in, to accept it as a possibility, because this one really attracts us. And sometimes it might be more of a physical attraction, so to speak. Yeah. So just see the complexity here, the richness, and how interesting, all of our issues are, and certainly, the issues of the relationships with other individuals. Okay.
Okay.
I hope I helped more than confused with all of this, but we are complex.
We'll find out with the feedback after.
Yes.
All right, number 4. What were the main challenges you overcame to write the book?
The main challenges, I think that one of the main
that you
things
overcame.
was, yes, I think that it was just trying to organize myself to find time to write it. At that time, and you probably remember this, Martin, just traveling almost every weekend to different cities to give classes, and the amount of classes that we would give, and just trying to find time to actually sit down and write it and do it was certainly something that took the logistical aspect was something that took a while. Because what happens is that at the moment that I started writing the book, I had already read several books. I had already been giving classes for several years as well. So the information, to a certain extent, was fairly organized in my mind. It's just that I needed time to actually sit down and write it, so to speak. So that took a while. And also the other things, also logistical, just the physical aspects, and these are the interesting challenges of the physical life, right? Is just dealing with all of the other physical aspects, dealing with a publisher, dealing with many things. I don't know, maybe some of you here might have already published books and everything. If it's usually a more, a publisher that has already a little bit of a reputation, normally if you give them your book and they accept it, they won't publish it next week, even though you're already giving it to them in PDF, and it would seem that you can just simply upload it to Amazon. But normally the process will easily take 1 year. before it is published. And for you, the author, who already want, that information out there, sometimes that year, can get quite long. But the main challenges were logistical, physical challenges, indeed, more than anything.
Okay. Very good. Number 5, did you experience any differences in your non-physical perceptions / experiences while writing the book?
That's a good question. Yes, I would say even some experiences seem to me like I was having them, so as to put them as an example in the book. Because of this process that I was mentioning before of the logistical issues, I think I wrote most of the book in 2002. So if you check on the book was actually published in 2012, 10 years later. So part of the reason was because of this lack of time. But at the same time, the good thing about it, everything has its advantages and disadvantages, is that during those 10 years, I was able to have a few other experiences, or I had several other experiences, but I had a few others that would fit right with what I was trying to write on that chapter. One of them is, for example, this experience, and now I don't remember if it's chapter 6 or chapter 5. Probably some of you have read the book, much more recently than me, and you remember better the organization of it. I think it must have been chapter 5. And this is an experience in which I was giving energies outside the body to individuals who had passed away and who seemed to me that some catastrophe had happened. And I was there just to try to help them to summarize things, to go into the light, to not stay there, even though they had already passed away. Sometimes when people pass away and they pass away in such a sudden and dramatic fashion, they are almost like in shock, even outside the body, still thinking that they are alive, but in shock without being able to react. And that experience, seemed to me that it was fitting right with that chapter. And it actually, I remember, came while I was doing a revision of that chapter. So most of it, I had already written it, but I remember it came at the moment that I was doing the revision and I was working on some of those aspects. And I thought this, not only was it, I felt grateful, because I was able to have that experience and at the same time contribute with that, but also I realized this was very useful for the book. Another thing that happened because of that is that several of my experiences after that had to do with those types of moments of people passing away and trying to help them understand that they had passed away so that they could, continue their process. I don't want to touch on other tragedies, even because some of them I know for sure. So everybody's going to start thinking about that. But some of them were here in the U.S. And I remember also trying to guide, trying to act out the event with them, with the individuals who were suffering those tragedies. And this was all sort of like a non-physical play for them to be able to realize that they had already passed away. And, that there is a lot of existence beyond that and that they can move on to a different condition. So in that respect, yes, or specifically as one example, that did happen with those experiences. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Number 6, did you have phases of more productivity versus not, or was it more consistent throughout? I think you alluded a little bit to this before.
Yes, I definitely had phases. I certainly my Christmas and New Year's, on some years they were completely dedicated towards this. So yeah.
Yeah, very right. 7, what chapter resonates more with you personally and why?
I think that it probably is the last one, the one about planning and designing the life task. And I think that that happens to be the case just because in that chapter you see, and I was able to see also, how a lot of the other pieces start to fit in. So not just for example, ideas like paranormal phenomena and developing our intuition, and for example, having a greater degree of cosmic ethics, or connecting to the spirit guides. But the chapter of the life task sort of like puts everything into perspective for us, and shows us why these things are so important, and it and why it is so worthy to develop them and to try to improve on them. So I think the issue of the life task was the chapter of the life task was the most important for me. I was, since a young age, I was always involved in volunteering groups. So we have, even with you, Marty, we have already gone through a few volunteering groups there, and certainly that chapter of the life task also helps me to reinforce the idea how this is a very big part of my specific life task of trying to assist, help with information and with different aspects. So I think that would be the chapter that was more relevant for me.
Mm-hmm.
Let me also say I have a little dog that from time to time contributes here to the conversation, so don't mind him, but go for it.
Very well. All right. To what extent has the knowledge conveyed in the book been validated by your personal experience? To what? Validated? Yes.
Yeah. No. I would say the things that I have written in the book are because I have experienced them. This is not so it's not a theoretical book. It's not something that was read somewhere else, or that I spoke with somebody else, or that I just simply did research. No, research, I mean reading. No. This has been also corroborated or validated, by my experiences. So you can ask me about experiences, out-of-body experiences, for example, with somebody else, about meeting relatives that have already passed away, which obviously show you that we don't die with a physical death. There is this continuum towards the soul, or towards, our essence, and we will be there. And sometimes I joke, we'll be there after we pass away, with the same bad jokes and good jokes that we have right now. We're probably gonna be repeating them after we pass away. And
let's hope not.
Let's hope we have new material. But also, I have had experiences where I see people preparing their next lives, where I have been, for example, thinking about chapter 7, I think the last one, where I see these activities of education that happen in the non-physical dimensions, where people take these sort of like educational activities, and they are preparing themselves for their following life. So I have observed this. I have participated of them in out-of-body experiences, and I don't remember if I mentioned this detail in the book, but as in a few of those experiences, as I was there watching those activities, I remembered that, before I was born, I was there on some of those specifically, which obviously makes all the sense. When we have out-of-body experiences, we tend to, visit or go to places with which we have affinity. So more than likely, the reason why I was having, an experience in that specific, reality dimension where this educational preparatory activity was taking place was because I had already been there and I had some affinity with it. So I have had those experiences as well. So yes, for me, it's much more of a practical book, an evidentiary book than theoretical at all.
Okay, very good. So another participant wrote, although I continue to have precognitive dreams, visitations from non-physical beings during sleep, and other experiences while awake, I don't have many lucid OBs as I used to. I meditate and practice the velo exercise daily. Do you have any insight or suggestions? That would be helpful.
Okay. So what I understand.
So there's quite a bit of phenomena, visitation, sensations, precog,
Precognition.
yep, and other experience, but not many lucid OBs. The person practices the DLO daily. Are there any other suggestions or insight to be able to have more lucid OBs?
Yes, there could be several reasons why this is happening. Um, and really several. So sometimes our phases of our life, generally speaking, there are certain phases in which people tend to have more out-of-body experiences. Sometimes there are also certain phases in our life in which we are a lot more focused on certain physical tasks. Like, for example, we are starting out a new business, or very involved in a project at work, or we are very involved with a new relationship that we just started. I'm talking here about a romantic relationship. And it's almost like our energies and the focus of our manifestation are mainly directed towards that. And that's okay. That's the time for worrying or, focusing on that. And then sometimes the out-of-body experiences diminish a little bit. So this would be one thing, the ebbs and flows to a certain extent of life. Now, sometimes it also might just simply be more individual things that we are doing. Like, for example, lately we have been reading more books about precognitions or more books about other phenomena, and then our interests take takes us a little bit more towards those specific phenomena, as opposed to others. um, Generally speaking, as we do energy work and notice that the looseness of the energies and the looseness of the energetic body, are going to help to develop basically all of the phenomena. So as we work with them, sometimes the ones that we tend to have more experience on, and let me maybe expand a little bit more on that, but the ones that we tend to have a little bit more experience on, or the ones that we are more predisposed to producing, tend to be the ones that stay with us a little bit more constantly throughout our life. Yeah. What I mean by experienced on is or better yet, what I want to expand on when I say that is that it's important for us to take into account not just this life when we think about experience. Sometimes we spend one or two other lives developing heavily our clairvoyance, and many times, or our precognition, and many times we had at that life we hadn't even heard about out-of-body experiences. So at this moment, it just comes much easier for us to have precognitions than out-of-body experiences as we develop our energetic capacity. So that is one of the factors, of course. But generally speaking, what I would do to try to have more out-of-body experiences, if you're already, practicing the vertical flow, the velo, what I would do is I would try to then find what is the technique that fits a little bit better with me, with my personality. So in the book, I know I explain a little bit some of these aspects. Like, for example, for me, will it be better a technique that is based on breathing? Will it be better a technique that is based on imagination, on concentration? If we think that we have a very good looseness with energies, will it be a technique that is based on energetic work? So there are different types of techniques, and sometimes it's just a matter of us trying to find which is the one, that fits a little bit better with us. I don't know, Martin, also in this
Yeah,
process,
I would add to
have
that.
any.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me as well. I would say also to be specific to choosing the techniques, based on our the attributes that come more easily to us, and then actually putting, practicing them, so actually putting it to the test. So having maybe a 30-day kind of phase where we really, every night or every noon or every afternoon, whatever it fits into our schedule, that we actually attempt the OB with the techniques. I think that could be something that helps establish saturation in the mind as well
Yeah.
as connecting energetically to the phenomena. Not to mention, of course, the continuing the loosening of the energies through the exercises during the day as well. That will continue to be key. But this person says that she or he does it daily, so that would continue. Yeah, those would be the little things that I would add to that.
Yeah, and you know, I would say this that Martin is saying is important because this is part of the reason why now in our classes on Mosaic for out-of-body experiences, we have that regimen, that OBE regimen that we give to the students for them to follow this for like 4 weeks, to have like a 30-day challenge, you know, like a 4-week challenge. Because as you focus on that, um, you know, you're able to have a little bit of better results, especially if you have already been doing, you know, energy work for a little bit. That should, you know, fit very well with your condition.
All right, very good. We have 3 more minutes, so I guess time for another question. One more. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Um, will there be a second edition at some point, maybe with added techniques as well?
At some point, yes, yes. And even a revision. That, you know, how things after a while you need to update them. Even right now, I was talking about this new element of the classes at Mosaic that we didn't really have when I wrote the book in 2012. And there are others, of course, even different techniques that we offer and that we teach, you know, in the classes that we currently give. So yes, at some moment, not only does a second revision has to come, and this is where also the logistic of talking to the publisher comes in, and it's always an interesting conversation with them.
Okay.
But also a second book. I have several other ideas, several other things that I want to include. But let me say something that because the publisher actually has made this question many times. You know, for publishers, if you already have an author that published something and it was you know, well received. They usually look at the Amazon reviews and they see how many stars the book has. So they like, you know, how you guys, I guess, how the book, you know, was received. Then the question, of course, comes, you know, what other book are you working on? You know, can we already publish another one? Because you know, that tends to happen. But the one thing that I always like to emphasize, and even in our classes, is that sometimes in terms of information, um, basically most of the information certainly is already on that book, and there is certainly more information that can be given. But the biggest key towards all of this is not so much in more information, it's on the doing, the exercising, the repetition. You know, some of you probably have heard me say this many, many times. And this applies to almost everything: playing video games, you know, going to work on a specific profession, etc. The fifth time that we're doing something, we are better than the first time. And the 100th time that we're doing something, we're better than the fifth time. So it's not so much about necessarily more information. It's more about, you know, the putting it into practice and going at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's something important to emphasize.
enormously. I agree. All right. Well, you have another minute, perhaps, before
All
we
right.
start to wrap it up. So here's another one. Is there other research that you have been involved with after this book?
Yes, there quite a few actually. I think that one of the most interesting ones that I did, and probably some of you participated on it. For, you know, I remember I saw the list of names. Was this survey that I did, trying to, you know, quantify, if you allow me to use this technical word, trying to put into numbers in a more objective fashion the benefits of having out of body experiences. Because, you know, when people have out of body experiences, they talk about how they lose the fear of death, they are more happy with their life, they are more fulfilled with their life, you know, there's a plethora of benefits there, right? That they, you know, have. So, but what I wanted to do is, besides just simply, you know, whatchamacallit, the anecdotes or people saying it, you know, what do the numbers say? So what I did is I took some psychology tests that have already been used for determining the well-being of individuals and in universities, and they have been used extensively. And I applied it to people that have read books on out-of-body experiences and have had out-of-body experiences, okay? So I wanted to see if that population statistically reported greater benefits than the average of society. So basically, I wanted to quantify the benefits on out-of-body experiences, and the results were that yes, they do show it, and they show it in in a crescendo. So the more out-of-body experiences the person has, the more fulfilled, generally speaking, they are with their life. The happier they are, um, the more they understand their lifestyles, etc., etc. But one of the most interesting conclusions from that one, and there were many. Here I am summarizing a big presentation that I gave about 2, 3 years ago, which, by the way, must still be in my Facebook, wall, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, if you want to watch it. But so one of the biggest conclusions there is that I realized that people who don't have out-of-body experiences, but have read books on out-of-body experiences and know about the information on out-of-body experiences, started also presenting the same benefits in their life as the people who have had out-of-body experiences. Not to the same degree, but certainly they already started understanding better their life, trying to be more spiritual, more ethical, etc., etc., etc. So that was, an interesting experience and an interesting research precisely to try to bring this more into the mainstream, where sometimes more in the academic, arena, um, my colleagues, some scientists, they want to see numbers, data. So that was certainly one of them.
Very well. Thank you. All right, everyone, we have reached, there are some questions that we weren't able to get to. I apologize. But if I don't finish on time, Ashley will absolutely kill me. And that's happened too many times in this life already for it to happen once again. So just to leave here up on the screen, our next Mosaic events, we have a Clear Your Energies workshop coming up on October the 4th. We have OBE Dialogue on October the 5th. And the next OBE Fundamentals weekend is going to be on October 10th or 11th, if you know anybody that might be interested that hasn't done it. Any questions or for more information, you guys already have our email there, team@mosaicwe.com. I'd like to thank Louis once again for your time and the questions, and thank all of you as well for participating and for sending your questions. And we will continue to see each other again. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again.
Yeah, and just to have one last thing, notice that many times we, if you email us, we are going to answer you with some responses. But besides that, also, usually I think that the first Monday of every month, we have what we call the OBE dialogue period. And then basically anybody can come in and ask, the instructors of Mosaic, any question. And sometimes, Martin is there. Most of the times it's Ashley, actually, but we're going to see if we can start rotating that so that, these questions don't go unanswered. All right. So thank you all so very much, especially for the fact that you are interested in these topics. It already says something about us.
Thank you. Thanks all. Have a good night. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.